So like most folks that you've heard from so far today, I stand here representing a large group of people who have been active in the effort to bring early warning to our respective populations. So here in the United States, there are a lot of folks involved in this effort, some of whom are noted in the list on the lower right, but there are many more people and organizations involved in this. So I speak for them, at least to the extent that I say good things, and if I say something stupid, that's on me. The USGS and our partners are focused on creating early warning in the United States, first on the West Coast for quite obvious reasons. That's where most of the risk is concentrated. So this is the annualized earthquake losses as calculated by FEMA. And you can see that 66% of those losses are concentrated in the state of California, 77% in the 3 West Coast states of Washington, Oregon, and California. And I mentioned yesterday in the context of cost-benefit analyses, I'm getting ahead of the story just a little bit here, but if you take a look at these annualized losses and our estimated cost for operating an early warning system, we really only have to mitigate about 0.7% of those losses in order to make the system cost effective. If we look at fatalities and the human cost of earthquakes, we see that again, this is from that same FEMA report. The estimates of fatalities depend on time of day, but again, doing that cost-benefit analysis, the required impact of an early warning system in the U.S. need only mitigate 3% of those annualized losses in order to be considered cost-effective on an actuarial kind of calculation. Well, in order to move forward with earthquake early warning, the USGS has recently issued a technical implementation plan, but it was the work not only of USGS, but our university partners as well, multiple authors to this. And it states the USGS's intent in the context of the Advanced National Seismic System, the system that monitors earthquakes across the nation. It expresses our commitment to bring public earthquake early warning to the United States and to also produce early warning parameters to more sophisticated users like businesses that can then use that to make more sophisticated decisions in particular business contexts. And we will do that as soon as the networks and the telemetry and the software testing is completed to the point where we can justify making that step. And of course, you know that that kind of commitment is in part dependent on funding. Our partners in the state of California, because of the law that you heard talked about yesterday, the state has ramped up its process of creating a state implementation plan. They're calling it CEEWS, California Earthquake Early Warning System. And you heard, if you were here yesterday, the elected officials and the leaders of CalOES and the USGS restate their commitment to this and to work cooperatively, so that these two efforts are not different efforts. We are moving together in a unified way to bring early warning, in the case of CEEWS, to California. It's just the USGS vision is a little bit larger in terms of geography. This process is well underway. There are lots of committees meeting, tackling some of the technical, political, and financial issues related to early warning in California, and we're making great progress, and there will be a technical implementation plan ultimately produced as a result. One of the outcomes of those discussions has included a relationship model about the system and private entities. There is a lot of emphasis on public-private partnerships. And so we see there are basically two major ways for partners, and I think, yeah, let me find the power. No, we just need power. Okay, yeah, sorry, it got knocked out.
Here we go.
Let's see if it'll come back. No, it's yours. You want to fix it?
No, we have the power cord. It just got knocked out.
It just got knocked out, yeah. That's right. Well, while Jen is working on that, I was describing the potential ways for partnerships with the system. The core system will be operated by the government entities for a number of reasons, not the least of which is we have the authority and the liability protection for issuing alerts. But the private partners, as they are today within CISN, can contribute ground motion data. And so CISN, the California Integrated Seismic Network, is already a public-private partnership with very important partners contributing ground motion information into the larger system. On the other side of the system, sort of on the output side, the three boxes on the right in this diagram are the various users, and this is probably a simplistic view, but there would be direct users, those companies that directly use the information to take actions within their own facilities. An example for that might be someone like BART, who is today making those kinds of decisions based on the early warning information. In the middle, you have the value-added and redistributed services. These are the companies who are making a business out of helping other companies use the early warning information. Ad hoc would be an example, and we're working with others as well. And then at the bottom box is the public distribution system, like IPAWS, that would take the information out to the public. So the red there is sort of, you can think of that as sort of the public part of the system, and the blue, the private parts of the system. A little bit on the history of how we got to where we are today. You've heard it various times again during this conference that early warning has been on the agenda for quite a long time, but the USGS began seriously funding earthquake early warning research and development starting in 2006 in the first of a three-phase process. The second phase was the demonstration phase, and it resulted in the demonstration system that is operating today and has been sending live alerts to beta users for the last 2.5 years. We are now in the third phase, a little more than halfway through, and it will result in the transition from the demonstration system to a public prototype. We will not go public at the end of that time because we do not have the funding yet to do that, but it gets us one more step in that direction. The ultimate goal, of course, is to roll the system out, and we will begin with limited rollouts, and then ultimately, as we identify the stable funding and make sure that the system is ready for prime time, we will then do a full rollout, including to the public. The current beta users in the demonstration system are listed here. You can see that they're a combination of government and private organizations. We're getting feedback from them, and we're also quite interested in getting them used to the idea that there is something called earthquake early warning and getting them to start to think about how they would take advantage of earthquake early warning in their own sphere of influence. The funding for early warning specifically is outlined here. Now keep in mind this is not the funding for general operations of seismic monitoring. That's a different line item. And the system, called ShakeAlert, is built on top of the existing monitoring infrastructure in the United States. So you can see the USGS through those R&D efforts, plus through some build-outs and improvements to the seismic networks, has ponied up on the order of $10 million. The Moore Foundation has very generously also supported 3 years of R&D, and you can see the figures over there on the right. The prospects for federal funding was part of the discussion yesterday. There is a stable line item in the USGS budget at the order of about $850,000 a year that we're using to support early warning R&D and development and implementation. And the prospects are looking quite good for FY15 for an additional $5 million. But there are lots of ifs in that if there's a federal budget, if this particular thing, this particular item makes it through. And so we're planning and optimistic, but we're also realists. And of course, it has the downside of being 1 year money. And it's very difficult to build a system and think about operating it into the future when you don't know if the stable funding will be there. And then finally, most recently, the City of Los Angeles, and in fact, City of Los Angeles and Long Beach through a UASI area, that's Urban Area Security Initiative. That's a Department of Homeland Security initiative for making metropolitan areas safer. They had some money, and they asked us, could we spend it for them? And we accommodated them by improving the seismic network in the Los Angeles area significantly. That was a huge effort, and Ale has a lot more gray hairs as a result of it. So we're making progress with the little bit of funding that we have, and I'm quite proud of the way that the cooperators in this project have been able to move forward, even under the very limited funding that we've got. The system, as you know, we call ShakeAlert, built on top of the ANSS infrastructure, and so we're leveraging all of those assets, stations, telecommunications, the data centers, software we've already got, the expertise of the individuals who run the seismic networks, and we're using the management structures. And so we're going to use the 3 Tier 1 management centers that already exist in the ANSS context: Seattle, Northern California, Southern California, and those will also be the centers from which the early warning is operated. So the early warning system will actually be very tightly coupled with the earthquake monitoring efforts. Makes a lot of sense. I want to say a few words about the performance of the system to date. It's difficult to do statistics of the entire system over time because the system continues to evolve and mutate. So I'll just show you a couple of recent earthquake examples. The most obvious, of course, is the South Napa quake of just a few days ago. Heard some people that it woke them up. It woke me up too, and I was in Southern California. And the reason it woke me up is because I've got a cell phone app that is really annoying because it goes off in the middle of the night and it tells me I've got 200 seconds before no shaking is felt. But that's my problem because I've set the threshold very low. I want to hear all of the triggers. This succeeded quite well in this event. The way that I prefer to measure the performance of the system is from origin time forward. So you can take a look at this, and the alerts began streaming from the system just a little bit over 5 seconds after the origin time. Quite impressive when you consider that it took probably close to 2 seconds just for the P wave to get to the surface. And that is in, I've got some constraints down there written in orange. The network required 4 stations to sense the motion before those alerts began to stream. Some of those stations are of the older type that have not yet been upgraded for earthquake early warning. And as a result, the zone of no warning was actually larger than it could be once we developed the system further. Down in the southern part of the state, we had the La Habra earthquake, which actually did significant damage in a very limited area. That, too, was a success of the system. Same thing, in this case, about 4 seconds after origin time before the alarms began streaming. And we've seen similar performance for other events like the Encino and Westwood quakes. If you were here yesterday, you heard me summarize that the system has 5 major components. So here it is. And I'm going to walk through each of these components, go into just a little bit of detail, and I'm going to emphasize in this discussion what the government part of the system is going to do and what the private partners are going to contribute to the development of the system. The first part is the ground motion sensors. Of course, we already have ANSS sensors. We're going to upgrade those sensors to the extent that the funding allows. We're also beginning to add real-time GPS to the data inputs, and there's a lot of work to be done there. We think the optimum spacing is somewhere between 10 and 20 kilometers, and so that's what our goal is. And of course, we're upgrading stations to make sure they're high quality and low latency. What can the partners do? Well, they can host sensors. Just getting permits for places to put sensors is a real pain in the United States, and so that's a big deal. Or, ideally, they can buy and install sensors themselves and contribute the data streams to us, and we do have companies that are doing that today. And then, of course, they can make earthquake early warning capable devices, that is, boxes that can host the early warning algorithms on site and just ship us parameters. By the way, the California map there with all the blue dots, those are the stations that are currently contributing to the demonstration early warning system. And we've made some estimates about how many stations are required. very, very rough numbers so that it's easy to remember, about 400 are contributing today. We think we need about 400 more. On the telecommunications side, we will continue our strategy of using diverse telecommunications methods to ensure that the failure of one system will not take us completely offline. And we'll count on our partners to provide telecommunications capabilities within their own internal systems, and not only on the input side, but on the output side, as I'll discuss in just a minute. And we do that today, so we expect this will just be a continuation of the sort of business that we've done. So for example, on the lower right there, there's a U.S. Air Force facility that we have turned into an antenna farm with our own telecommunications. All that stuff is ours. The third piece is the central processing. So here's a rough schematic of the central processing architecture. Our 3 algorithms in green across the top: on-site, ELARMs, virtual seismologist. They all produce origin time, location, magnitude, and an uncertainty estimate. Those go into the purple box in the center, which is the decision module. It puts them all together and makes sure that we're not declaring 2 earthquakes when there's only one. It decides among the different answers which answer to use and send out to the world. And that is the nexus, or the switch yard, if you will, where additional algorithms can be plugged in as they prove their worth. And right now, there are some finite fault mechanisms, or finite fault algorithms coming online that will contribute as well. The output from the decision module is a stream of information. It's not just a yes-no decision. It's not drop, cover, and hold on, or don't. It is a stream of information being updated once per second to identify what the Earth is doing. And so this is really a very sophisticated tool that tries to do modeling of the fault and the earthquake as it happens. One of the parts of that central system is that it must be very well tested, it must be very stable, it must be very reliable. And so we're working on strategies to build that central capability using best industry practices for operating computers, software environments, testing code, managing code, and all that sort of thing. So don't pay too much attention to those diagrams on the right. They probably don't make any sense. That's just to give you the general idea that we've got really sophisticated, complicated things going on to make sure that the system is going to be reliable and fail-safe. On the delivery side, you'll notice those right 2 boxes on the bottom are slightly different blue. That is because it's starting to move outside the area of expertise of we scientists. And we're going to depend on other folks for a lot of this. We will generate the alerts, we'll send them out over the internet, but the internet's not going to be very reliable. We'll probably send it out over other means as well, including over the FEMA IPAWS system, Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. And then we'll look to our partners to come up with really clever, robust ways to send them out as well. You heard just before this talk about the ad hoc vision of the world. And there are some other companies that are also looking at ways to more reliably distribute these data to end users. So mass notification companies will undoubtedly get into the game here and help us with this problem. Smartphone apps, of course, are an obvious way to go. It's not the only way to go, but it will be an important way to go. And we're working with some companies on prototyping that as well. And of course, we look toward other mechanisms like social media. Maybe you'll get tweets about these early warning alarms. When we think about who's going to be the end consumer of this, who are the end users, think in 2 categories, people and things. The people part, of course, is quite complex. It involves a lot of education and training. And so we won't do all of that as a project, but we will try to integrate all that education and training with all the other education and training efforts that are out there among many, many organizations. And then we'll try to foster social science. I heard a question about that a little bit earlier. What is the most effective way to get people to take the proper actions given a very little time to act? And there's actually some work being done in the social science arena to try and answer those questions. When it comes to automated responses or the responses of things, Again, we are going to depend very heavily on the private sector for that because that's what some of these companies already do. We think that maybe a little bit new will be the need for a capability in the end user's facility to create sort of a logic tree about what to do. Remember, the data is not just yes, no. The data is there's an earthquake of this size. You're probably going to experience this shaking in this amount of time. So what is the right decision for your factory, for your tower crane, for your operating room? And those decision-making tools need to be created by the private sector or the end users themselves. And so we'll expect the private companies to come up with those sorts of applications. Well, as I've already said, I will coordinate the education and the social science, but we expect the partners will not only make those logic boxes, but will make the devices that turn off the valves, that interface with SCADA systems to control water systems and sewage control and all sorts of things. So all of that will be basically a new area of business for the private sector. Well, I want to run through a couple of screens. This is the UserDisplay tool. This is just sort of a proof of concept thing that runs on a laptop or a desktop computer, and it hooks up to the demonstration system, receives those streams of data, calculates the amplitude, or I'm sorry, the expected intensity at your location, and does a countdown for the time until the S wave reaches you. And this is a scenario of the ShakeOut magnitude 7.8. And of course, the problem is obvious. When the earthquake begins, in this case, down near the Salton Sea, it's very far from Los Angeles, which is where this particular instance of the UserDisplay is set for. You can see the little blue house, a little off-center. So we've got 61 seconds, but it's far away. And that's why it's so critical to actually track the progress of the fault as it ruptures. And so this particular scenario includes the finite fault solution. And you'll hear more about those later on in the talks today. So as the event progresses, now 37 seconds away from the S wave reaching the Los Angeles area, but you'll see that the estimate of shaking has jumped up to moderate because the earthquake rupture is approaching the city. And as the rupture continues to rupture towards the northwest, it's getting closer. Now we're up to strong shaking, but only 15 seconds to go. And then finally, it graduates up to very strong shaking, now with about 5 seconds to go. So it's important that the system be updating all the time and giving the best geological information to those end users so they can make well-informed decisions in their own context. We've got an estimate of the cost of the system. You hear it described in various ways, sometimes by lumping it together into a 5-year number. Here are the raw numbers as expressed in the implementation plan, broken down by California and the Pacific Northwest. For the West Coast system, about $38 million to build it and $16 million a year to run it. So those are the numbers that I've been using for these sort of cost-benefit analyses. And that would encompass build out of all those 5 areas with probably not enough funding in this particular plan for the education, training, and outreach component. But that will come. We'll understand that, that cost a little better as we move forward. So what should you take away from that? USGS, Cal OES, all of our university partners, many people are committed to implementing public early warning, not only in California, but the entire West Coast. ShakeAlert demo has been successful. It's been sending alerts for 2.5 years. It's caught the big earthquakes and done it quickly. And we are dedicated to completing the system, but it will require a lot of additional work, a lot of additional investment, and the political will to make it happen. That's it. Thank you.